What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Make sure we're not having any technical difficulties. Let's wipe this camera off so you guys can see me better. What's up? What's up? What's up? Let me know you can hear me in the chat. Great. Awesome. Just tweet this out so we can get everybody in here. So we're going to do something a little different than the free agency live chats. Those I kind of gave a little brief off the top of the day's news. Obviously, a little less going on right now. All just speculation for the draft. But we hadn't done one of these in a while, and I wanted to hop in and just answer your guys' draft questions. Obviously, a lot of options for the Chargers at 13. I mean, depending on what mock draft you check, they're taking a different player. My latest mock draft, which is in the description below if you want to check it out, I had them trading back out of 13. Just figured it was a good time to maybe assess that option, because there's certainly a scenario where both of the top corners are off the board, both of the top tackles are off the board. Obviously, J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, and then Rashawn Slater and Penei Sewell. If all those guys are off the board, it becomes a little bit of a tricky situation. If Mac Jones is still there at 13, right? Washington's in need of a quarterback. Chicago's in need of a quarterback. I checked around with those beat writers, and it seemed like they both would be open to trading a second-round pick to move up. You move back to 19, you move back to 20, you pick up another pick in the top 100, right? And then you still have an opportunity to draft a pretty good player there, Maybe Darisaw falls there. Christian Darisaw, the offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. Maybe Tevin Jenkins is there, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma State. Maybe Greg Newsome is there, cornerback out of Northwestern. So you pick up a good player at 20, and then you can add another potential starting caliber player in the second round. Washington picks at 51. Chicago picks at 52. So I thought that was sort of an interesting scenario to look into, but they could easily trade up too. And there's obviously a scenario where Penei Sewell is falling. If the Chargers have him graded highly and think that he's really a franchise cornerstone left tackle, that's something they could look into. Now, what would it take to move up from 13 to 8, from 13 to 7, right? That's sort of what we're talking about if Sewell's falling. You go down that road. I wrote about it in my mailbag last week. You're probably looking at a future first rounder if there's competition to move up there for him or for another player. Organizationally, the Chargers typically won't part with premium picks like that, but it all depends on their grade of Sewell. But anyway, I wanted to really get into your questions today. I got about a half hour for you guys. And I'm not going to do my usual thing where I'm rambling a bit, trying to get through as many questions as possible and just get you guys some information here. Like I said, my mock draft 3.0 is in the description, go check that out. That's my latest content. And then tomorrow I got something kind of cool coming for you guys, sort of doing a retrospective on the Chargers offensive line drafts over the last 4 years, or lack thereof, and sort of looking at how Tom Telesco maybe could have built a better offensive line through the draft. So that's something I'm really looking forward to sharing with you guys. So that'll be up tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, let's get into your questions here. Post those questions into the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can over the next half hour or so. We'll start up at the top. Looks like a comment on Jadeveon Clowney going to the Browns. I told you guys during free agency that he wasn't a culture fit. That was never going to happen. We'll see what he does with the Browns, but he's sort of become a mercenary now and they're signing these one-year deals. I don't think fiscally, financially, that's a bad decision for a player. Obviously, you'd like a little more long-term security, but if he's comfortable doing a year-to-year deal, then he can make a decent amount of money and help teams that are sort of willing to take chances on players like that. All right. I read recently that Staley views the Chargers wide receiver core as, quote, complete. should that put to bed the possibility of them choosing a player like Waddle or another wide receiver with number 13? That's Jalen Waddle, Alabama receiver. This is the time of year when coaches and general managers are not always necessarily telling the truth. So it's hard to take anything they say at face value when it comes to them directly talking about the draft. I mean, if everyone recalls last year, Tom Telesco said that he was comfortable with where the Chargers were at linebacker, and they ended up trading back into the first round. So as a reporter, you got to know the people you're talking to. You have to know the team. You have to know the depth chart, and you have to kind of read between the lines and figure out when these people, coaches and GMs, are lying. Based on the roster and based on my knowledge of Tom Telesco and how he operates, I sort of saw through that because I knew they were going to have to take a linebacker. I figured they were going to take one in the first 3 rounds, and they ended up trading back in. The issue here is that we've only known Staley since January, and we haven't had a ton of time around him. So I don't know how he operates at this time of the year. He's never been a head coach before, so he hasn't been forced to sort of hold these pre-draft pressers. I don't know if he's a guy that's sort of, speaking truthfully and being upfront and real with us in those press conferences, or I don't know if he's a guy that's sort of smoke screening. So it's hard to say for sure how he really feels about the wide receiver corps until we see how this draft shakes out. With that being said, I do think the Chargers are in a good place in terms of receiver. They obviously have Keenan Allen. They have Mike Williams. And I think Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson showed enough last year to sort of fight for that wide receiver 3 spot. They both have the speed to be that over-the-top threat. And then they did draft a wide receiver in the 5th round last year. They obviously saw something in Joe Reed, right? They didn't just draft him to be a kick returner and gunner. Now, that was part of the reason why they invested the 5th round pick in him, but they obviously thought he had some traits offensively that could translate to the NFL. So, and then obviously they also spent a pick on KJ Hill. So they have pieces there. I find it hard to believe that the Chargers would spend the 13th pick on Jalen Waddle, considering all of their other holes. And this is something that we should talk about. Best player available is a myth. GMs, personnel decision makers love to talk about, hey, we always take the best player available. That is a luxury that good teams have if you have a balanced roster. If you have holes like the Chargers do, you can't afford to take best player available, or else you're going to have a mediocre to below average starting left tackle, and you're going to have a mediocre to below average effectively starting cornerback, right? That's where they're at. So they need to get talented players at those positions, which means they have to spend premium picks of them. Now, if they had bona fide starters at those positions, if they had a true balanced roster, then of course Jalen Waddle is going to make the Chargers better. This is not a knock on Jalen Waddle, who has a chance to be a fantastic NFL player. I mean, he's a freak athlete and exceptional with the ball in his hands, despite being a little bit on the shorter side for a receiver. But they are not in a position to use that premium pick on Jalen Waddle. I think that would be a huge mistake. I think the 1st round pick has to be, personally, I think it has to be an offensive tackle. But I could see them going offensive tackle or cornerback. But those two needs are glaring. They need talented players at those positions. And personally, I don't have a lot of faith in this organization to go out there in the 2nd and 3rd round and find a starting caliber offensive tackle. What about this team and how they've operated over the last 8 years under Tom Telesco tells you that they are capable of doing that? They've taken a number of offensive linemen in the 3rd round. They took Forrest Lamp in the 2nd round. None of those picks came close to panning out. They've had multiple offensive line coaches in here, including James Campen, a notoriously great developer of talent, right? A guy who developed tons of guys with the Packers, including David Bakhtiari. And yet they still haven't been able to get the most out of those picks. So what tells you that their evaluation process will lead to success if they take an offensive tackle in the 2nd or 3rd round? They have to give themselves the best shot, which means using their best pick on an offensive tackle to bring in the most talented player they can at that position. And that's where I'm at in terms of the 1st round. Now, that's how I feel. I think that they're going to hope that one of these 2 corners falls to them at 13. Brandon Staley needs a very capable, big, aggressive press man corner. They don't really have that on the roster. Michael Davis is probably a better man corner than zone corner, but I still view Michael Davis as a really, really good number 2 corner, lower level number 1 corner. In Staley's scheme, you don't want to have a lower level number 1 corner. You want an elite number 1 corner. There aren't a lot of those guys out there, but if you have a shot at them at 13, You brought in a defensive coach, a guy that you think can build an elite defense, and I think it would make sense for them to go get a defensive player, a cornerback specifically, that Staley can sort of mold into his defense and have a guy there who can do the things that he asks at the position. So to put a bow on it, if they take Waddle at 13, I think that's a huge mistake. If Waddle is there at 13, there are going to be teams that want him, and you could absolutely trade out. Pick up another second-round pick, like I said. All right, let's keep going. Hey, Pop, I was wondering if there are any free agents that you'd want the Chargers to maybe consider signing. I don't see them signing any starting caliber players before the season starts. Still got the vet, Geno, available for pickup as a last resort to filling a need at defensive tackle. Geno Atkins, I'm assuming. Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think they're going to address the defensive line depth in the draft. They should be able to get some a quality rotational piece. Fourth round. That's where I think they'll end up. Fourth round, fifth round, somewhere in that area. How far would Greg Newsome need to fall for the Chargers to consider trading back into round one? I think that the likelier option with Newsome is that they would trade back and pick him. I find it hard to believe that the Chargers would trade back into the first round twice in 2 years. I think they really want to allow Brandon Staley to mold this roster in his image, to really get his hands on it. And so adding 9 players that Brandon Staley had input in onto this roster would be a big step toward doing that. I think that, trading up obviously would cost draft picks, and that would mean fewer players that Brandon Staley can pick individually to join this roster. I think that's going to be a goal. Brandon Staley has a different vision for this team and for this roster than Anthony Lynn did. And so the best way to get that turnover, to bring in guys that you like, that have the type of measurables that you want, that have the type of makeup that you want, is through the draft. That's the easiest way to turn over a roster quickly. And so I think they're going to give Staley the opportunity to draft these 9 players. And so I think Newsome probably more likely in a trade down situation. All right, what else we got here? Who, in your opinion, Pop, has been the most accurate the past few years with their mock draft predictions? Our Ben Standig, our Washington football team beat writer, has been tremendously accurate. So I'll check out him. And then Benjamin Albright has also been really accurate with his mock drafts. He's very plugged in, so I would check him out as well. All right. Sewell and Slater are gone by 13. Do you think J.C. Horn is the pick? Yeah, as long as he's there. And if Surtain is gone, Sewell's gone, Slater's gone, then I think that's the direction they would go. Personally, I would go in a different direction. I would take Darisaw for the reasons I listed earlier. They need a tackle. They just need a tackle desperately. And that's where it starts and ends for me. But I think the team, in terms of what they will do, if J.C. Horn is there at 13, Sewell and Slater are gone, and so is Surtain, then I think Horn would be the pick. All right, thoughts on Horn at 13. We just talked about that. 13th pick, we talked about that. Odds the Chargers trade up for Sewell. So, guys, if you want like a deep dive breakdown of what the Sewell situation could look like if they trade up, check out my mailbag from last week. You can find it on my Twitter. And I went into the draft value. I went into the possible trade packages. I went into the scenarios where Sewell would fall, where he would fall to, where the Chargers would have to trade up to. It's all in that mailbag. So go check that out if you want like a deeper dive into every single facet of the situation. The Cliff Notes version is that he probably isn't making it past 7 because I think someone would trade up with the Lions to take him. And so it would likely cost, a future first to get up to that spot from 13, just based on draft value, based on precedent. It depends entirely on how the Chargers have evaluated Sewell. I find it hard to believe that they would trade a future first to move up for a tackle, just based on how they value draft picks. Where things stand with the Ravens, is they could probably get Orlando Brown if they're willing to give up a first round pick. That obviously isn't the case. Sewell's obviously younger and would be on a rookie deal, so that's a different factor. But just in terms of how they operate, they're pretty much never going to give up a first-round pick for a player. In this case, it would be 2 first-rounders for a player. And you better think that player is destined for all pro level play if you're going to give up that much. Telesco trading back. I think that's overblown. Like, I don't think Telesco is like, I don't want to trade back ever. I know he's never done it, but I think he just makes decisions based on the information available and based on the situation. Like, I don't think he's adverse to trading back. I just don't think a scenario has come across where he felt like it was the best decision. All right. Nice beard. Yeah, you guys like it? I think it's a little scraggly. I meant to shave this morning. I forgot. Heard you on Locked On NFL Draft. Was awesome. Thanks, Brian Hall. Appreciate that. Yeah, Trevor and Ben do awesome work. So if you guys haven't been listening to Locked On NFL Draft, go check that out. Those guys are as in-depth as anyone with their draft coverage. So always love helping those guys out. I think cornerback is looking more and more likely at 13. Enough OT depth to get a start at 47 in round 2. So I keep getting this. What OT depth? Who are we talking about here? Who are you getting in the second round? Like, give me some names here. Like Sam Cosmi? Walker Little? Now I'll roll off some other names. Brady Christensen? Dylan Raduns? Like, who are you getting there? Tevin Jenkins is not falling. He'll be gone in the first round. And that's what I'm saying. So you can wait till the second round. If you're with the Packers or if you were the Steelers, right, and you've just had a history of developing offensive linemen, sure, wait till the second round because you have a system in place of developing these players. The Chargers do not have that. Now, I think the new coaching staff is going to have a great impact on young players. I have a lot of confidence in Brandon Staley in terms of his ability to get the most out of players. But with that being said, there is no established, proven system in place with the Chargers of developing offensive linemen. So what tells you guys that they're going to be able to all of a sudden draft a second-round tackle and turn him into an immediate starter? I have no proof of that. And they've tried. They have tried, right? They took Trey Pipkins. He's entering year 3, and this is his opportunity to take over the left tackle spot, and they clearly aren't comfortable with it. Brandon Staley was clear about that he feels like there's a massive hole at left tackle. Okay? I mean, it took Forrest Lamp in the second round. He walked in free agency. They took Dan Feeney in the third round. He walked in free agency. Now, they haven't really spent a lot of capital on offensive linemen, but they have not developed these guys either. So that's what I'm saying here. If you do not have a proven system and a proven history of developing players, you can't wait till the second or third round to fill a hole as big as they have at left tackle. You have to take the most talented player. You have to take the player that given the odds is going to give you the best chance of developing into a starter, and that is the 13th pick. I understand that there's more depth at that position, but that doesn't mean, right, that the players at the top are less talented. There is still a gap between those players that are first-round talents and those players are second-round talents. And if you can't develop offensive linemen, then you are taking a huge risk by trying to fill a starting hole by taking a player in the second or third round. That's what I got for you there. That's my thought process. And listen, like, I've watched a lot of Chargers football over the last 2 years, right? I've seen this offensive line. It's not good enough, and it has never really been good enough. It's something they have to address. They have to change the philosophy in terms of how they spend their capital and how they address offensive linemen. Because guess what? They're going to be aging on the line again. Corey Linsley is 30. Ode Ibushi is 30. Brian Bulaga, 32. Right? You want to be younger. Those players are going to get hurt less often. They're going to cost less. And they're going to have potential to develop. Now, I think that they're going to be much better on the offensive line after the signings in free agency. But you need a long-term plan here. The patchwork offensive line has not been good enough. It might work for a year like it did in 2018 when they got a lot more out of Mike Pouncey than they were expecting, and they got a lot more out of Russell Okung than they were expecting, and they got a lot more out of Michael Schofield. But that was a perfect storm. That was a perfect storm. No one expected Michael Schofield to come in and play a serviceable role at right guard, but he did. And that's a credit to the Chargers staff, to their pro scouting department. But that was a perfect storm because you saw what happened to Mike Pouncey the next 2 seasons. He couldn't stay in the field. You saw what happened to Russell Okung. He couldn't stay on the field. And then what happened? They didn't have the depth. They hadn't hit on enough draft picks to have the depth to put a quality offensive line on the field. And that's why they've lost a ton of games. You want to point to one thing that has led to the Chargers losing more games than they've won over the last 2 seasons? It's the offensive line. So I can't imagine them going into this draft thinking, okay, we'll wait on the offensive line. We'll take there's depth at tackle and interior line, so we'll wait until day 2 and day 3 to fill those holes. That hasn't worked. At no point in Tom Telesco's tenure has that worked. So something's got to change in terms of how they approach this. They have not taken an offensive lineman in the first round since 2013. Only 6 teams have done that. They're one of them. You want to know the other teams? One of them is the Packers, who develop offensive linemen as good as anyone in the league. One of them is the Steelers, who develop offensive linemen as good as anyone in the league. Then it's the Bills, the Panthers, the Bears. Do you want to be in a conversation with the Panthers and the Bears? They haven't been very good recently. The Bills, they drafted Deion Dawkins and developed him. That's their starting left tackle. Who do the Chargers have on their offensive line that they've drafted and developed? I'll wait. Who? They don't. They got nobody. So that's where I'm at on the offensive line. All right, let's keep going. As far as the draft, what positions do you think the Chargers do not need to look at all? That's a good question. I would throw wide receiver in there. I think they're pretty set there. Excuse me. Running back, I think they're pretty set at running back. And they've been really good at finding, late round picks, undrafted free agents. I mean, Eckler was an undrafted free agent. Justin Jackson was a 7th round pick. So I wouldn't prioritize running back. And then I think they're set at inside linebacker. They got Kenneth Murray, obviously Drew Tranquill, Kaiser White. That's a nice trio. They can sort of fill the gaps there, the depth there, undrafted free agents. They got a couple guys coming back. Cole Christensen. You can find 4th and 5th inside linebackers. Especially in this scheme, Staley doesn't really rely on inside linebackers that much. They don't play a really key role in the scheme. So I think they're pretty set there. So those 3 positions, I think they can sort of, I don't think ignore, but you can't really ignore any position, but, put less of an emphasis on it. All right, Horner, Slater, given the choice, that's Rashawn Slater for me, no doubt about it. How am I feeling about Brandon Staley so far? I mean, this guy is freaking brilliant. Like, I learn so much every time we have a press conference, and he's just fantastic at distilling complex concepts into simple terms, and explain the way he explains his defense, the way he explains his philosophies. It's clear, it's concise, it's thorough. From a knowledge standpoint, from a communication standpoint, he's been thoroughly impressive. But as I've been saying, like, we don't know what kind of coach he's going to be, head coach he's going to be, until they start playing games. So I have to reserve judgment. But in terms of first impressions, he's done about as well as I could expect. Where do you see the priority being in the second round? Yes, I've written about this. It's tackle and cornerback. Put it in whatever order you want. I put it tackle, then cornerback, but I wouldn't call you crazy if you put it cornerback, then tackle. But those are the 2 positions. And it's like those are tier 1. And then after that, you've got safety, you've got tight end, you've got interior line, you've got defensive line. Those are sort of your tier 2 needs. That's sort of how I assess it. And then tier 3, I think, would be edge. Kyler Fackrell is a nice third piece. I mean, the team's pretty high on what they think Chenna can do in the scheme. We'll see how he does with more consistent snaps. That was something he never really got in Gus's scheme. Chenna is in the final year of his deal. So, maybe they surprise me and go edge a little earlier, but that's sort of how I would tier out the needs. Yeah, Steven Nelson, I just don't see any more starting caliber free agent signings. I just don't see it happening. I think they're just going to try and roll over all their space to next year. Who are your favorite prospects in this draft? I got one guy. I love Tommy Tremble. That's my guy. That's going to be my guy in this draft. Tight end out of Notre Dame. I just think he makes a lot of sense for the Chargers, and I think he's got a lot of potential. He's still young. He's only 20. He's got the blocking thing figured out. He's a pro-ready blocker, and I think that given his athletic profile, he could develop into a pretty nice piece, if they decide to move on it from Jared Cook next season. Any former Chargers returning to the team as free agent? No. Darisaw, round 1. Eric Stokes, round 2. Isn't that what I had in my mock draft? I'm pretty sure that's what I had in my mock draft. Yeah. Shout out Josh Landis. Citing the mock. Melvin Ingram come back to the team. Nope. That's not happening. Part of me hopes that we just grab a left tackle once and for all, but if Horner Parsons is there, how can we pass on that? Yeah, Micah Parsons is not happening. They took a linebacker in the first round last year. If they take 2 linebackers in the first round in 2 years, that would be a horrible allocation of resources. How realistic is Horner 13? I think it's on the table. I think it's definitely on the table because he was there on the Locked On Draft mock draft that I did. He was there at 13. Now they opted to do. They wanted the beat writers to do what they think the Chargers should do as opposed to what they think they will do. If it had been the opposite, and I was saying what I think the Chargers will do, then I would have taken Horn at 13. He fits the profile of what Staley's looking for in a corner. Cristobal and Ingram, yeah, he's not coming back. You can book that. How are Staley and Telesco working together? Yeah, I think it's been solid so far. It's hard to really get a sense of it until you see the draft and then you see how those draft picks fit into the scheme, right? And so we kind of have to wait and see on that specific question. Obviously they're communicating. Staley is obviously telling Telesco and his staff what he's looking for in terms of athletic profile, in terms of makeup, et cetera, et cetera. Then Telesco has to go out and get those players, and he's been good at that in his tenure with the Chargers. He is open to listening to coaches, figuring out what they want in a player, and going and get that player. So I would not expect that to change with Staley. The question is, how does it materialize? And we won't know that until the season starts. All right. Deebo Samuel Light. Was that in reference to Joe Reed? Because that's correct. Didn't really come to fruition last year, but in terms of his measurables and athletic profile, 100%. I mean, it's uncanny how similar they are in terms of body type and speed and all that kind of stuff. Deebo's a much better player, though. I don't think there's a world where the Chargers don't take a tackle if the top 3 are still there. I'd be shocked if they had Darisaw ranked so much lower than some other player. So the one thing with Darisaw is there is not a consensus on him. It's Sewell and Slater at the top, and the third one is very debatable between teams, and it changes. The one thing with Darisaw that's a bit of a concern is you see on tape that he's not a great finisher, takes some plays off, not consistent in that regard in terms of his effort. And so that could lead some teams away from him. That could be a huge turnoff for some teams. But, when we talked to Staley, he mentioned that size is really important. Length is really important on the edge as a tackle. Darisaw is the most prototypical tackle, and the stuff he did on tape that was positive was tremendous. I mean, he is a beast in the running game. And when he turned it on as pass protector, you saw the traits that make him a first-round talent. And so you bring him in, in the Chargers' eyes, maybe you bring him into your program. You get him with Frank Smith, the offensive line coach. You get him with Sean Surratt, the assistant offensive line coach. You trust your coaches can get the most out of that player if he has the physical traits that you're looking for. And that's sort of my logic there. All right, let's keep going. Yeah. Chris Harris Jr. is old and going to leave next year. Michael Davis is not a number one cornerback. Horn has to be the pick equals Jalen Ramsey. Let me just tell you, no one is Jalen Ramsey. That guy is on another level. But could he do 70 to 80% of what Jalen does? Sure, I could see that. I mean, Horn's a great prospect. And the one thing he does, he's not afraid to get dirty, get in there and provide run support. He's physical, great in press man, great in off coverage. I mean, he has everything that Staley's looking for in a corner. So that marriage does make a lot of sense. All right, let's keep going. I'm falling behind here. All right. Jenkins over Darrisaw. The reason I keep going Darrisaw over Jenkins is just because he has longer arms. Let me pull up the measurements. Darrisaw is 34 and a quarter inch arms. Tevin Jenkins is 33 and a half. So just for those who don't know, generally 34 inches is the cutoff for tackles. You do have some tackles that have had success with shorter arms. Braden Smith with the Colts is one example. He's like a fringe all-pro guy at right tackle. But there's only, as Brandon Thorne said today on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays, 34 inches is the cutoff. And there are only two guys playing with shorter than 33-inch arms. So, if as an organization you believe that length is a really important trait to have at tackle, then Darrisaw would be the pick over Tevin Jenkins. But, Brandon Thorne, who I trust as an offensive line evaluator, also has Tevin Jenkins as number 2 tackle on the board ahead of Rashawn Slater. So I think the one trend with this tackle group is that there isn't really a consensus, right? Last year there was a group of 4 tackles that everyone was sort of like, yeah, these are the 4 guys. This year it's, even Sewell, there's people that are up and down on, there isn't really consensus on him either. And a lot of that is there aren't guys that have the real prototypical size, even Penei Sewell, his arms are 33 and a quarter. Rashawn Slater, 33. Jenkins, 33 and a half. Cosme, 33. Eichenberg, 32 and 3/8. Walker Little is closer to 34 at 33 and 3/4. Brady Christensen, 32 and a quarter. I mean, a lot of teams would look at Brady Christensen and say, no way. Guard has to be a guard with those arms. That's just how some teams operate. And I don't think it's necessarily a wrong way to approach it. I mean, the measurables matter, The tape should be the most important in the scouting process, right? If you can play, you can play. But measurables do matter in terms of trying to project, can this guy be the type of player that we hope he can? And the way you project that is obviously you look at the tape to see if he can play, but you look at his measurables, you look at how fast he is, his short area quickness, his length, and try and project, can he be a star in terms of first-round pick? Can he be a star at this level? Later round picks, can he be a starting caliber player? In the late rounds, can he develop into a depth piece, right? I would draft 2 tackles if I could. I wouldn't rule that out at all. Let's see what else we got. Staley has stated in another podcast that you got to have linebackers who can roll. Kenneth Murray can roll. Kaiser White can roll. Those guys are fast. They can get sideline to sideline. So, and Drew Schrenkel is a better athlete than a lot of people think. Trey Pipkins can develop behind this new O-line. Listen, that's the hope, right? He was a developmental project when they drafted him. He's had flashes where you're like, oh, there it is. But, The problem with offensive tackle is you can play 75 snaps of the game perfectly. But if there were 77 snaps on those 2 snaps, you got beat and you gave up 2 sack fumbles, guess what? That's not getting the job done. That's the life of a tackle. I mean, you got to win 100% of the time, because the one time you don't win against these edge rushers in the NFL, that's a game-changing play. It's a tough life. That's why they get paid a ton of money, right? What'd you think of Brugler's haul for the Chargers? Guilty as charged. What's up, guys? I wrote an analysis piece on that. Yeah, go check out the Chargers page, the athletic/team/Chargers. I wrote about 800 words just assessing Brugler's mock draft. Dane Brugler, that's our athletic draft expert. He did a full 7-round mock of all 32 teams, which is just insane, but he's better than anyone in the business at this. And so go check that out. I wrote about what I thought about the players he picked. All right, what else we got? Wrote round on Tremble. I think third, 77, if they want to be safe and make sure they get him. Some people think he might be there at 97. I've been mocking him at 77, though, just because a lot of the simulators I've been doing, he hasn't been there at 97. All right, what else we got? Ingram going to sign somewhere before the comp pick deadline? I don't know. You guys shouldn't be surprised if he's not on a team next year. What do you think of the current safety room? What are some of your favorite safety prospects in the draft if the Chargers were to select one? I think they need another safety, man. I really do. They're pretty high on Nasir Adderley. Staley spoke glowingly of him last week. Called him my type of safety. Actually, I think he said our type of safety, which is I'm learning is a Staleyism. Never I, always we. But what he's looking for in a safety, right? He likes versatility, he likes intelligence, and he likes the ability to play in the deep part of the field. Nas has all 3 of those. They've always thought that Nasir Adderley could play slot corner if necessary. And Staley loves to have safeties that he can move around, right? Play in it's always going to be a 2-high shell, but say they want to drop into cover 3 and play a guy who can play a single high, a guy who can come down and play some slot corner, like they did with John Johnston, play some linebacker, play some dime backer, which they call the money position. Nas can do that, right? Nas has a lot of versatility because he's a pretty physical safety. He can hit. He's not afraid to get after it, get in people's face, get physical. So, I think that Staley's going to get more out of Nasir Adderley than Gus Bradley did, because Nasir Adderley was pigeonholed into that single high role, garbage cleanup role. It's really easy to fall asleep back there. I've talked to Rayshawn Jenkins about this a lot. Obviously not with the Jaguars, but just like, he talked a lot about how you really have to be focused for a full game, because you can go 15 plays back there as the single high safety in Gus Bradley's defense without seeing any action. You're not around the ball. You're not hitting anybody. It's about keeping your mind right, because the one time that player gets through the second level, you have to make the tackle or it's a touchdown. That's a tough spot, and that was the first time Nas Adderley was getting playing time in the NFL, and that's a tough position to put a young player in. So maybe Staley gets more to Nas Adderley. With that being said, right, Staley used a lot of 3 safety packages last year. Nick Scott, the Rams' 7th-round pick, was playing like between 35 and 50% of the snaps over the second half of the season. So they really need a third guy that they can bring in, because they're going to move Derwin around. They're going to get Derwin down in the box. They're going to blitz Derwin. They're going to play him in the slot. They're going to play him all over. And when he moves around like that, you need a second safety to fill that 2-high shell. So who's it going to be, and where are they going to draft it? Now, in my mock draft, I got an additional 2nd-round pick, and I spent that on Richie Grant out of UCF, who I think makes a ton of sense. I mean, at UCF, and Dane Brugler wrote this in his NFL draft guide, that teammates called him a coach on the field. I mean, that is perfect Staley right there. I mean, he wants really smart safeties. That's what he's looking for. So Richie Grant would be a guy that would make a lot of sense. I like Andre Sisco. He's coming off an injury, though, so that could be a little bit concerned. You already have an injury with Derwin. So that gets a little dicey, taking a bet on a Guy coming off an injury when you already have an injury at the position. But those are a couple of names. Let's keep rolling here. What else we got? Get those questions in. Slater as a possible center conversion. Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of fuse Slater as like a positionless guy. You know, he can play all 5 spots. Chargers need a tackle. Go live on draft night. Okay. I think I can get behind that. All right, guys, we're at 40 minutes now. And I got to finish this story for you all in the morning. Let's get some final questions in here. Some quick hitters. Get your final questions in the chat. I saw some comment about Parsons being a linebacker. That's what I said. Yeah, he's an inside linebacker. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Chargers after they used the first-round pick on a linebacker last year. I don't know if that was in response to me or someone else. Get those questions in. Would you rather trade up for Sewell and lose the second rounder or trade down and gain a second and get Jenkins? That's tough. I mean, I think Sewell is going to be great. So I'd probably take the first one. I just believe the Chargers need to do whatever they can to find a franchise cornerstone left tackle. All right. Tranquil's going to be an inside linebacker. It'll be Kenneth Murray and Drew Tranquil starting at inside linebacker in base packages. And then when they'll be playing nickel and dime 75 to 80% of the time. But it's not like Gus Bradley's scheme where they're taking the same player off every single time, right? Like when Gus went to nickel, extra cornerback came on, Sam linebacker came off every time, every single time, right? When they go to dime backer comes on, Will linebacker comes off, Mike linebacker stays in the field every time. It's not going to be that way with Staley, right? So sometimes he'll keep 2 linebackers in the field, take off a defensive lineman. Sometimes he'll keep 1 linebacker on the field in dime. You know, sometimes he'll keep 2 linebackers in the field and then take an edge player off. So that's it's going to be a big transition for you guys and for me too in terms of understanding the defense. It is the polar opposite of Gus Bradley's philosophy. It's all about multiplicity. You know, throwing as many different things at the quarterback as you can to try and confuse the quarterback. That's disguise, that's personnel packages, that's every facet of the defense philosophically, right? So it's going to be a lot. It's less simple. You know, it's more complex. That's the whole idea behind the defense. So it's not going to be as easy to identify who's coming off, who's coming on, what the dime package looks like, what the nickel package looks like, and guys are going to be moving all over. So I'm excited to see it, honestly. It's going to be a learning experience for me. You know, I've obviously watched some tape on it, but going and actually seeing it at training camp and seeing what it will look like with the players the Chargers have and the personnel they have, it's going to be really fascinating. I'm excited for it. Caleb Farley, possibility. I don't have any idea where that guy's going to end up. I mean, he was Dane's #1 cornerback. I thought he would have made a lot of sense for the Chargers. Has off-season back surgery. Dane in his most recent mock had him at 29 to the Packers. I mean, shoot. I think that would be, if he's there, that wouldn't be a terrible trade back in scenario, right? Seen a lot of mock drafts with the Chargers taking a wide receiver. Do you see it? I don't see it, man. I mean, if it happens, I would view it as a massive mistake. And that's how I would put it. You know, the draft season is a crapshoot. Everyone gets surprised. But I have a pretty good handle on this roster and what they need, and it's not wide receiver in the first round. That was not Gus Bradley shade. Let me tell you. I'm just trying to explain the difference in philosophy. I mean, there is a real, genuine explanation for going in that direction, right? It is logical to have a more simple scheme. the drawbacks are that quarterbacks can identify what you're in better, but it helps young players develop. You have too complex a defense. It's going to take young players a while to grasp it and develop. The idea with going with a more simple scheme is that you can insert young players in very quickly and get them up to speed very quickly. And that way, if you suffer injuries, you can come back from them more easily. And Gus Bradley deserves a lot of credit. I mean, he built this defense around Derwin James and lost him in 2 straight seasons. And the defense was not a disaster. I mean, he would be the first one to tell you that they didn't perform the way that they wanted to, but you lose your best player, your most versatile player, a defensive player of the year candidate. It's going to be tough to come back from that. And he did pretty well with what he had. I mean, they also lost Chris Harris. They lost Drew Tranquill. And I wouldn't characterize them as a bad defense last year. I think you guys were too hard on Gus, but it's a moot point at this point. All right, guys, I'm doing 2 more questions. So get them in the chat, and I'm going to pick the 2 ones that I think are best. Nothing left? Oh, that's a good one. Do we think a training staff overhaul is the biggest team need, or stop expecting 30-plus free agents to stay healthy? So they got a new director of sport performance. They hired him from the Broncos. So, I don't know if it's necessarily an overhaul, but they are going to be doing things differently. And one thing that I didn't really get into in my Staley takeaways, which we can get into now, like this is on the front of his brain. He was talking specifically about Brian Bulaga, saying that he's going to take things that the Rams did with Andrew Whitworth last year and apply them to Brian Bulaga. They're going to give him time off. They are going to make his health a priority. They're going to look into all of this data they have, tracking data, all of the sport performance, science, sports science data they have, and apply it to Brian Bulaga and get him on a plan that will hopefully keep him on the field. Like this is something they are talking about. They are considering. It is something that is very important to Brandon Staley. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of peace of mind when it comes to this. Like this is something they are focused on. With that being said, signing over 30 free agents is going to come with more risk, obviously. But you need to treat those players differently. When you're 23, your body heals differently than when you're 32. And so they need to get Brian Bulaga on a plan, and they're going to formulate and implement a plan that will hopefully for them keep him healthy. And we'll see if it works. But it's something they are talking about. It's something they are putting a lot of emphasis on. I like that question. That was a good one. All right. One more. Justin Jones losing weight for Staley's defense. Oh, did you see that on Instagram or something? That wouldn't surprise me. I think he was playing at like 305 last year. Yeah, I mean, like it would make sense for him to get closer to maybe 295. Playing more of that 3-tech role, give him a little more versatility in terms of his movement around the line. He was really like a 3-tech nose tackle and a 4-3. I think getting a little lighter would maybe give him a little more versatility. That wouldn't surprise me. Is there any hope that Dean's sister sues him into oblivion? No shot. That's not happening. I'm sorry, guys. The only way the Spanos family is selling this team is if they want to. I have poured over the petition. I have sent it to lawyers. I have done the reporting. And there is no scenario where the Spanoses are forced to sell the team. They could do so willingly. That could happen. But they're not going to be forced to. Just legally, it's not possible. I don't want to end on that question because we're here to talk football, folks. And I just like doing this. I said 30 minutes. We're going on 50 minutes. How did the Raiders screw up their pick? I don't know. They're going to take like Najee Harris or something. My brain's going to explode. All right. We got anything left? Anything we didn't get to? I feel like we discussed everything. When are you going to try out for the Chargers? I'm a kicker. That's my position. My career long is 45 yards. But I went out when I was home in January. I went out with my brother and kicked. And the leg strength was not there. I'm losing it. I'm an aging prospect. I think my time kicking field goals is over. How many drinks do you have sitting there? I have 2. Water and coffee. It's my lifeblood. All right, folks. Listen, if you are not subscribed to The Athletic, we don't have a deal going, so I can't do my usual sales pitch. But in the description below is my mock draft 3.0. If you haven't joined and you really want to check out who I picked for the Chargers, click that link and you'll be able to sign up. Like I said earlier, I got some cool content coming for you guys tomorrow morning, just sort of looking at how the Chargers have addressed offensive line over the last 4 seasons, 4 drafts. So I think that'll be a pretty cool look at sort of how they got to this point. So keep on the lookout for that. And then we'll have my mock draft 4.0 coming out Monday, which is, for those that weren't with us last year, that is me trying to get as close as possible to who I think the Chargers will draft. And the first 3 mock drafts have sort of been me going through different scenarios, throwing out some players that I like, that I think would fit. This final mock draft, I'll be trying to predict it as close as I possibly can. So look forward to that on Monday, and then I'll just be grinding draft content all next week. I'll probably do these every day over the draft. Is that what you guys want? Let me know in the chat. That seems like a good thing. Yeah, I think what most people have been saying is like do them after big events, when a lot of people are interested in my takes on stuff. So yeah, I'll probably do them. Thursday is gonna be pretty late, so you guys will have to wait up with me because I just got a ton of writing to do, obviously. But I'll try and hop on here Thursday night. We'll talk about the first round pick. I'll hop on here on Friday after rounds 2 and 3. We'll talk about those picks. Saturday we'll get into it too. I think that would be good every day for the live stream. Vince says every day, and Vince's word is gospel. All right, guys. That's all I got. Keep on the lookout for all my draft content. We'll do this again soon. As always, thank you for joining me.